So, Evolution 3, or something similar, we don't know for sure, but something similar is on the way. We certainly didn't expect confirmation so soon, but personally I'm pretty excited. Not only because it's, sort of my job. Now I've seen a lot of comments from people already asking why? What could they do in Evolution 3 to justify coming back and spending money a third time? Now I want to say up front that is perfectly legitimate, it's an understandable reaction, and you're more than justified feeling that way. I will also, however, say that improvements and small iterations through sequels is how most game franchises develop, and not every game is designed to act as a games as a service for all of time. Still, they will probably have to deliver something pretty impressive with the third game to get everyone back again for a third round. So, how could they do that? Let's look at 10 big key features they could introduce to lure people back. The obvious first reason, and really part of the reason we get sequels in the first place, is to see the new story. Now, whilst I don't think this was a particular highlight for Jurassic World Evolution or indeed its sequel, there was Chaos Theory, and that had some potential at least, even if it didn't go quite far enough. A story-driven park builder is quite a hard thing to manage, but given Evolution 3 is likely to tie directly with the new Jurassic World film coming in July 2025, it can potentially offer some fun twists on that formula at the very least. I'd love to see a new iteration on Chaos Theory that really pushes the boat out in terms of wild new ideas and alternate histories. Regardless, a new story is a guarantee, it's something to get excited about. What about the rest of the game? Breeding and baby dinosaurs are inevitably going to be close to the top of everyone's list. If our dinosaurs could breed, even a sort of off-camera, only happens when you look away style a la Planet Zoo, it would not only essentially double the roster in terms of dinosaur visuals, but it would make naturalistic, Site B style parks all the more realistic and beautiful. It also rounds out dinosaur behaviour and makes them seem more realistic themselves, all the while tying into central themes from the franchise. It could even be a plot point, the dinosaurs breeding against our will as in the original Jurassic Park, and in particular the original novel, where breeding in the wild was a much bigger deal. If I was honest with myself, and you, as I often am I'm afraid, I think this is unlikely to happen. The amount of work to design baby variants for what is going to be well over 100 species by that point, it just seems unlikely to me. It's a monumental task, and it's an easier thing to do when you do it from the very start, as in Prehistoric Kingdom or in Planet Zoo. Now perhaps there's a middle ground where maybe all the baby ceratopsians look the same and all the baby dromaeosaurids look the same, something like that. I don't know, but I think if they wanted a big tentpole come back to our game feature for Evolution 3, this is the one that it should be. This is the main thing I think that would get people back into the game. What is much more likely, and what I would suggest is pretty necessary now, is Dinosaur Enrichment. This is a huge miss at the moment that, even though it's not necessarily been a big part of the film canon, is absolutely a fundamental part of zoo games. Your animals need way to entertain themselves, and there's no reason a Triceratops wouldn't enjoy charging a tire hanging from a tree in the same way a rhinoceros would, or a Rex wouldn't enjoy scratching up against a scratching pole, or a small dromaeosaurid might like to jump around in sprinklers. Not only is this another opportunity to make our dinosaurs feel more alive and personal, but it deepens the zoo building mechanics, and it sends a good message about, animal welfare in general. This one really is basically a must for me personally when it comes to a sequel. It's one of the things that changes a dinosaur from a movie monster into a real life animal, capable of a range of wants and needs, and different varying emotional states. Speaking of dinosaur improvements, more variety in those dinosaurs would be greatly appreciated. And there's really two main ways to do this, the two ways that Prehistoric Kingdom, as it happens, currently utilises. The first is simply to have dinosaurs be born at different sizes. You wouldn't need a huge range here, maybe it's plus or minus 10 to 20%, and that would be enough to give some much needed variety to our herds and packs, whilst hopefully allowing animations to still function smoothly. The second is in skin colour variation. Now how this works in PK is on the same principle in the sizing, in that each skin has a small range of variation. Maybe it'll be darker or lighter 10 or 20%, or maybe the saturation will increase or decrease by a certain percentage. This means that even dinosaurs with identical chosen hatchery skins don't come out looking identical, and this of course increases your dinosaur variety even more. If a breeding system was in place, you can apply these same systems also to some sexual dimorphism. Another big tentpole feature and dinosaur behaviour improvement I'd love to see is the addition of semi-aquatic behaviour. Now this would require some terrain tool changes, and we'll get to those in a little bit, but if we could have deep water in the game, it would do wonders for our exhibit building, dinosaur behaviours, and even potential roster expansion. At the moment, it doesn't make any sense to have Dinosuchus in Evolution because it's either purely terrestrial or purely aquatic, other than those lagoon rock looped animations. If though we could create deeper water, then suddenly our Spinosaurids can swim around and move seamlessly onto land, and we can add things like Dinosuchus and other crocodilomorphs. It could even be used as a natural barrier the way that real zoos do for some of our less aquatically inclined animals. Of course, it also enables the thing so many of us have been asking for and want so much: boat tours, my wet beloved. I just mentioned deeper water, well let's expand that out a little bit to more terrain tools and general creativity. The terrain tools in Evolution 2 are a huge step up from the first game, but they're still very restrictive. You can't make waterfalls, you can't make volcanoes, you can't make cliffs or canyons, because every slope becomes soft and squishy like Baby Dinosaur. Now this is done, I suspect, because it means dinosaurs aren't awkwardly walking off cliffs or scaling up mountains they couldn't possibly scale. But the solution to that is pretty simple, no? Games like this use a nav mesh to dictate where an animal is allowed to move, accounting for things like items in the way and indeed the angle of the terrain. If you build a flat wall, vertical wall of land in Planet Zoo, your capybara doesn't magically climb up it, the nav mesh keeps it away from the wall. That same principle just needs to be applied to Evolution 3, and then we can expand that terrain. This expanded freedom could do with going even further though. Sometimes the hitboxes in this game they're verging on egregious, they really are, and your inability to stack or really control things like decoration placement is a big hindrance on park building. We just need, I'm not asking for Planet Zoo or Prehistoric Kingdom, but there must be a halfway between the two where we've got a little bit more creative freedom. Throw in waterfalls, staircases, bridges, all that kind of jazz, and suddenly our park builds don't require mods or bugs anymore, they can be carried entirely by the game itself. Whilst we're on the subject of the land, custom islands have been a big requested feature since before Jurassic World Evolution 1 came out. It's been a long time. Now, if we're honest, this is mainly because it was in Jurassic Park Operation Genesis, but that's as good a reason as any as far as I'm concerned. Now, even if the system was entirely cribbed from JPOG, sliders for rivers, mountains and stuff like that, it would make new park builds, especially when we're years into the game, all the more interesting. Throw in some toggles for natural features like waterfalls, etc., and maybe even some wild dinosaurs that you can pick to have roaming around, and you've got a ready-made, unique world all of your own to build on, and it really expands the lifespan of the sandbox mode of the game. Lagoons and aviaries were the big new additions for Jurassic World Evolution 2, and they've been largely successful, the latter in particular I would say. Lagoons have definitely got better over time as well, with new decorations, we've got the new attempted breakout animations, and relatively recently the new social animations to our aquatic animals. But they still have a lot of scope to get better. The animals would benefit greatly from interaction with guests and other animals, better hunting animations and more hunting in general, and more ways to view our aquatic animals. I pray every day for a submarine tour. More terrain modification in the lagoons themselves, more decorations, kelp, cough, and then things like ability to change watercolor and visibility. They lack the customization of the rest of the game, and they feel almost disjointed from it at the moment. I'd love to see that improved for a sequel. A lot of what I've talked about today is about improving the visuals and behaviours of the game and making it more akin to a customizable zoo game. But there's room to grow mechanically as well. Evolution 2 added the scientist system to the first game, which added a bit of wide but pretty shallow depth, as well as a few things like the expanded weather system and more dangerous dinosaur behaviours. Now all these mechanics are pretty surface level though and didn't really interact with each other, and I'd love to see the management aspect of the game doubled down on for the campaign at the very least. Make it enjoyable enough that we might actually use it in Sandbox rather than pestering Frontier to remove it from Sandbox like we had to do with the scientists. I'm not going to pretend this is easy to improve on or that I have all the answers, but I do think the game could be mechanically richer. I'd love to see more first person stuff, like if we could go and toss the meat into our exhibits and stuff in first person. I know that's becoming a slightly different game, but it would make me happy, that's all I'm saying. Finally, and this one eventually also feels inevitable to me, expand the roster beyond dinosaurs, pterosaurs and aquatic reptiles. Now of course we've had our first steps for this with the Dimetrodon, but it feels likely to me that Xenozoic mammals and potentially even your larger prehistoric arthropods could be included down the line. The former makes sense given Smilodon's emergence in Camp Cretaceous, and whilst the latter is probably a step too far, I don't know, I just want an Arthropleura, man. I'm not sure how tight the Universal Fist is on a game like this, and a lot will depend upon the direction of the next Jurassic film. Is it going to be all dinosaurs? Will it have a focus on something we're not expecting? Whatever we hear about the new film, we can take thematically and in terms of the species, and apply to Evolution 3 as well. So I know I for one will be keeping a keen eye on what kind of creatures are popping up. That's it from me anyway. Some of this could be folded into Evolution 2 as it is, for sure. But quite a lot of it would be expecting a lot for an expansion pack or DLC. Evolution 2 has already had a long post-launch life, and whilst I understand people who feel the sequel has been a smaller iteration in general, I implore you to go back and play Evolution 1 and see how limited it feels in comparison to Evolution 2. The game has come a long way with the free updates and such, but I do think a prospective sequel needs to blow us out of the water from the early stages. We need some big, hard-hitting, key features to really pull people back in. Now I'm cautiously optimistic for that, and I hope you are too, but if not, what features would convince you to come back for a third game? What would you most want to see in the sequel? Are there any that I've missed? Other than herbivores defending themselves, which I suspect will also be very high on the lists. Let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll see you lovely folks very soon. Cheers, much love as always. Bye bye.